What is up, everybody? There's nobody in here right now, but that's okay. You will be filing in shortly. We are live on a Thursday evening. It's Kev, it's Coach AB. We got to come up with some sort of fun little nickname for the two of us. I was trying to think of something earlier, and I'm like, no, I'm not that witty. So drop some suggestions in the chat if you're hearing this, all two of you for right now.
People will come.
We're trying to come up with a fun nickname. Trying to come up with a fun nickname for the two of us. The Peabodys. There you go. Peabodys. I like it. So, Kev recently, along with Brendan and the Dane train, Dane Draper, how did he survive that trip? I have many questions to ask.
Yeah,
you guys went to the Nike Coach of the Year Clinic, and Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins and Adam Fuller and John Papuchis all talked. I love JP. We don't really care about special teams talk.
There is no one in the special teams room.
We're not too worried about your fancy punt block, JP. Like, come on, man. We want to know how you develop these pass rushers. But anyway, yeah. So part of the staff was talking at the Nike Coach of the Year Clinic. Kirby Smart was there. There were a lot of guys there. Kev's gonna kind of name some of the other people that they were able to listen to, but we want to hear about the Nike Coach of the Year Clinic because I love clinics and I'm interested. And we thought maybe some people would be curious about it also. So break it down, Kev.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm hopefully I can get into the weeds a little bit here. But I kind of got to hear a lot of good talks this weekend. So I'm going to start with all the FSU stuff because I know that's why the people are here. But towards the end, I kind of want to give my thoughts. I got to listen to Lane Kiffin and Kirby Smart and James Franklin. So a lot of big names. So I kind of I think there's interesting football stuff there that can be relevant to anybody, even if you're not a Florida State fan. So, or if you are only a Florida State fan. So I think I want to start with kind of the most interesting stuff, in my opinion, and the stuff that I've kind of pulled the most clips for. So just to start off the conversation, Florida State runs a lot of counter.
Mm-hmm.
So what is counter? Well, counter is a play generally where you're pulling two people across the line of scrimmage, right? So either you're pulling a guard and a tackle. So the guard would generally do what's called a kick out block on the end, the tackle wrap around, or potentially you're pulling a guard and a tight end or whatever. So Florida State and most spread offenses nowadays would call pulling a guard and a tackle GT counter, where FSU calls this GY counter. This is, the Y, it's a tight end. It's just old terminology for a tight end. So this would be GY counter compared to GT counter. So the way that this kind of looks in real life, so I've got some clips that I can kind of go through pretty quickly. So this is just a regular counter play. So if you guys have watched this channel, you're probably well familiar with counter. And so they motion the tight end here, and I think, yeah, we get a little glitch from VLC Media Player.
Of course we do. All right. So the basis of counter play is it's a gap blocking scheme. You're going to have guys on the front side of the play blocking a gap. So typically, if you're an old wing T junkie, it's gap down backer. Sometimes there's some gap on backer depending on the play, but it's a gap down backer type play. So the front side is going to block their interior gap. Whatever shows there. It could be a defensive lineman. A lot of times you're going to hear people talk about, well, he's got to block this guy and he's got to block that guy. On counter, he's blocking his gap. If there's whatever shows in that gap, he's got. If nothing shows, then he's down to whatever the next thing inside is. If nothing's there, then he climbs to a backer. So in this play, the immediate threat to his gap is the defensive tackle. If that defensive tackle were to cross the guard's face, I'm sorry, I wish I had capability to draw on everything. But if the defense tackle is to cross the guard's face, then he's going to be looking to he's going to be looking to down. There would be nothing there. He would climb up to number 30, the backer.
Right.
Well, really, he would climb farther because on counter trade you're pulling somebody. But that's a general, easy, dumbed down version of explaining this.
Right. So this guard has no one here. So what's he going to do?
Yep. So nothing's in his gap. If something were to show in his gap, he's got that. Then he's going to go down. In theory, he would be back to whatever the one tech there,
Right.
and then climbing if nothing shows there.
Okay, so let's kind of see how that plays out.
So they double it. So they want to double the point of attack. That's more than fine. There's a lot of ways, when you're game planning certain things, you're going to tweak these things. But the basic concept is still there.
So they double.
They're going to double 92 up to number 6. Those two are going to work a combo up to number 6.
And what's kind of interesting here is, so you got two pullers, right? This is GY counter, the guard and the tight end, and you see that this defensive end is kind of crashing in here. So this guard's job is going to be to kind of fold in and do what's, some people call it a log block. I don't know what you guys call it. Back when you were coaching, but so he logs him inside instead of kicking him out. Let's see if I can get it where it's not glitching out on me. And that means that you basically get that he's kind of blocking himself here. So you just kind of hold him inside, and now the run has to bounce.
Corey Hall asked a good question. Does the running back read the linebacker? He's getting on the ass of that guard. That's or the tight end, whoever's pulling there. He's getting on his butt. He's following.
Yep, just straight up.
He's going to read his backside. Wherever his butt is where he's going to be. So as you're going to see, I believe it's Biscuit.
Yeah, it is Biscuit.
Yeah, Biscuit's going to get his butt to the sideline, which tells the running back he's got to get to the sideline. If his butt was inside, then he would cut it up inside.
Read the hips. Yep, see how the hips point inside, so he's going to follow him out, right?
Yep.
He follows the butt. That's a great question. So one thing that he talked about was, first he kind of talked about the technique, why he runs counter. So one of the reasons they run counter at Florida State, they kind of brought up, so a lot of people are running what's called the tight front. And basically that means that, you've got a nose guard and you've got these two, I'll just use the end and tackle because I've got a 4-3 set up here. But so basically you have so basically this guy's going to be doing what's called 2 gapping, or sometimes the modern terminology, they'll call it 1.5 gapping. And basically these 3 guys' whole job is to blow up any sort of inside zone, inside run. Yeah. So one way that you kind of account for that is, well, if they're going to cheat inside already, so that's tight, that's where the word comes from, you might as well just block them down, and now you have leverage kind of to get slightly outside of them.
Yeah, win with angles. It's also, I think some of it too is with these tight fronts that you can leverage the apex players who are going to walk out. And then, when guys the zone scheme became so popular because of penetration. Teams, all they wanted to do was penetrate. They wanted to get up the field, and zone schemes became so popular because of that. Well, now teams are doing what they talked about, 2 gapping or 1.5 gapping. They're staying more at the line of scrimmage, which makes it more difficult. They're trying to control the line more as opposed to getting up the field, which makes it more difficult for you to run your zone stuff. Well, now you just gap them and you get around them, which is football's cyclical. It always goes in cycles. Stuff always comes back around. But now if they're just going to sit there, well, you play your angles, you take your angles and get your numbers and out gap them by pulling people.
Yep. And so one other thing, so he kind of introduced, we run counter as well as anybody, NFL, college, it doesn't really matter. We're going to outrun counter. So one thing that they do that's kind of, it's a little unique. I don't know how many people do this. So this is going to be a counter play where it's a GT counter. So you've got your guard and your tackle counter, and Jordan Travis is going to read this backside end. So they've kind of got a read out of it, right? So he's going to pull it if this end crashes. He's going to give it if the end stays upfield. It's just a way to get Jordan Travis involved in the run game in your base run plays. But one thing that's kind of interesting, and you can see it here, is they do what's called a gallop step. So I think Robert Scott does it here, the left tackle. So yep, right there. You can see that they cross their legs. So some people don't like this, and I'll kind of show you why. But the reason they like it is because it helps you get across the line of scrimmage faster.
Yeah, you get quicker, but you also keep your shoulders square and you keep your eyes on your target. You're not losing your target.
Right. So did you guys gallop step when you were doing like the
No.
Buck series?
No.
Yeah, it's a little bit trickier of footwork, and it generally means that you have to teach two steps.
You've got to be a good athlete. I can't say I ever coached an athlete as good as, well, that's not true. I had one tackle, but we didn't run a lot of counter trey that year. But yeah, I mean, you need to be pretty athletic to be able to do that. But it's not you see it from guards too. They do the crossover pull. I can't think of what the terminology for it is right now, off the top of my head, but they'll do it from more of an interior or a tighter pull on power, where they'll crossover, step with the right, crossover with the left. This isn't too much different from that.
Right.
It's nothing crazy. It's there's timing aspect to it. They need to be able to time it up right. He's got to beat that back there because they're not trying to hesitate. There's no counter steps. There's no false steps for the back. I mean, it's a play that needs to hit a little bit quicker. So there's a lot going on there that you need to time up between the offensive line, getting their blocks, making sure the front sides is not having to hold for too long. Jeez, Jazz, come on, man. Only blocks out for some reason. You're never blocking out on counter.
Yeah,
that dude. See, he goes to his gap. The kid flipped the lineman flips outside of him, and he's thinking, "Well, this guy's in my gap. I got to block him." Well, no, you keep going. He's not your gap anymore.
Right, that's now the guard's job.
Right, we'll kick him with a guard.
Okay, so the one downside to the gallop pull is so this is a clip from the NC State game. You can see they're actually pulling this backside tackle, and he's a little slow, but potentially having your feet kind of crossed at this point in time early in the play means that if there's quick penetration, you don't have a good base to stabilize. Right. So that's really the only reason you'd not gallop pull, and this is when you would tell your guys, hey, we're gonna skip pull or do a different kind of pull here to kind of avoid this happening.
Yeah, you better have a good athlete. I mean, that would be another thing. But at this level of football, I mean, they'll just go recruit a guy that can gallop. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You see Jazz. Jazz doesn't do it quite as clean as Rob Scott does. You can tell Rob's been doing it. This was his third or fourth year in the system. This was Jazz's first year. He may not have done this at South Carolina, but it's not quite as clean.
Yeah. So another thing they talk about is so they like to mess with the reads, right? So we've kind of covered this when we watch the games, but some teams will really key off on guard movement or tight end movement, right? You see pullers, they'll flow hard. So an easy thing to kind of take advantage of it is you're going to see they think that they're keying these pullers, so they're going to show GT counter, but then give on a jet sweep the other way.
Yeah, you're just trying to freeze backers there, right? Play with the secondary if you can.
Right. So you basically get this guy and this guy kind of on the side of the field that you're running to, but they're stuck just long enough for you to get the edge on them.
Well, this is also a package play. So the quarterback is going to be running the
right.
He's going to be running the counter aspect.
So you're probably reading this guy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So on top of that, you can kind of see.
Well, I don't know if you'd be reading him. I think you might be reading the edge.
Let's see. Let's jump into that play again.
Eyes actually look like they're on the backer, maybe.
Yeah, his eyes look like they're here.
Yeah.
So he might be reading if they flow fast.
He's stuck there. I'm sure it's probably a give because you're outrunning him at that point.
Yep. He probably just sees him. He's flat-footed at that point in time.
Makes sense.
You can also kind of package this with, so that's the same motion we saw in the first play. Package this. So now you're running counter. you're showing counter, but you're really running a kind of cross play. So I think he's running like a flood. So they're kind of flooding this side of the field, but really what they're trying to do is get this guy to bite up on counter, which he does here, right? He sees the pulling lineman, he bites up on counter. And yeah. So since now that underneath defender that should be here is gone, that opens up this crosser.
Yeah, it gets them moving sideline to sideline, which is going to open up voids for your receivers. I mean, you've got to be able to build off of everything. It's all got to look alike. I mean, a good offense is going to build off of one play, especially your feature play. If your feature play is counter, which, I mean, in theory, counter comes off of running outside zone, running inside zone, which are two plays we know. We talked about a lot that they wanted to get good at running outside zone again. That was a play that they featured at Memphis. It was a play they got really good at this year. Finally, hadn't been able to run it at all in their previous 2 year seasons, but were able to run it pretty well this year. And then counter off of that. And then your play action, your jet stuff. I mean, just you can do a ton of stuff with one scheme. Oh, my man, Mike Merrick in the building. What's up, Mike? So, did Norvell talk about offense at all?
So Norvell did kind of talk about offense. So there's one more counter clip I do want to briefly discuss before we get too far. I think if you're following FSU football under Mike Norvell, you can't get enough of counter because it kind of defines everything this offense does. So most teams, if you're not keying off the guard, what you'd potentially be doing is keying a tight end, right? Potentially, if there's a tight end on this side of the ball, you're expecting counter to go this direction. But they really do a good job of mixing this up. This is actually fairly unique for Norvell's system. You don't often see GT counter go towards the tight end. So they're really trying to mess with the eyes of the linebackers, giving them some tendency breakers. So you run counter this way, and then you run counter back the other direction, and the linebackers don't really know how to fit that very well.
Yeah. Well, what's nice too is you're attaching. I don't think they're attaching any RPO to this, but
no,
you get the backer to widen with the release of the tight end. So
right,
you
he
really
goes straight
kind of take him out of the window right away.
Right, six
is the tight end to the sideline here. It also gets the end to widen.
Yeah, so you see just this movement. Yeah, pulls
you
both
affect
of these
two players really who are going to be in the hole, and you get them kind of out of the way.
Right, and that really opens up the desired hole. So messing with kind of what side you run it to, doing these like counters off of counter, right? Showing counter and then doing a pass play or whatever.
Run that back for me. I want to see if they gallop step on that one. Because this is a tighter pull. This is a tighter pull for Rob.
No, they just turn.
Yeah. He actually, he's actually going to block, and then
he does look kind of confused here. He goes down and then kind of maybe they're presenting that on purpose, try to help. They know it's an easier, like a shorter pull, so they can kind of get some help on that double team for a second. Yeah, so that's counter. That's what Alex Atkins talked about a lot.
Makes sense. O-line guy's going to talk about O-line stuff.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like it makes sense that Florida State's offensive coordinator's an O-line guy. They're one of the best in the country at running counter. They do this. They do it well. They mix it up. I mean, if you go back and watch the Miami game, they just ran counter down the throat, and there's nothing you can really do about it.
Yeah, so Bill said the job that Atkins has done cannot be understated. Our O-line in years past would have struggled with communication cohesion. This O-line has really good chemistry. I tend to agree with that. I mean, and what's interesting is, this past year you had Jazz come in, you had Darius Washington in and out of the lineup, you had Dimitri Emmanuel come in. You had Maurice Smith potentially losing his job and then solidifying his job, but then he was out for a little bit and then came back. It is a lot of credit to Alex Atkins, the job he does, getting this unit ready every season. getting them ready week in and week out. They're not perfect, and I think you see some of that because of them having to plug so many new faces in as they try to develop that room. But yeah, I mean, I think Alex Atkins deserves a lot more credit than he's really gotten nationally. I think he obviously gets plenty of credit amongst our fan base, but more credit than he's gotten nationally for the job that he's done, just getting these guys ready to play every week.
Yeah, I can completely agree. I mean, the offensive line, you won games because you could run the football. And that's something that would have sounded foreign to an FSU fan a couple years back.
I would have liked to have asked him about the Wake Forest game. I would have been curious his thoughts on that game if I could give him a truth serum, as I've heard some others say, what he thought about the Wake Forest game, how they didn't handle that kind of wide 9 look as well as they probably wanted to.
Yeah. So while we're on that topic, I think that's a good question. What is a wide 9? We're in an educational show today, so tell the fans.
So it's made famous by Jim Washburn in the NFL. It's a one gap. Defensive ends are lining up as wide as they can. You're going to have it's a 4-3 front. Defensive ends are lining up as wide as they can, and they are strictly rush. They're stopping the run on the way to the quarterback. They are in 4. If you remember watching the NFL years ago, they would be in 4-point stances as low to the ground as they could and just firing off the ball, trying to get to the quarterback. It puts a boatload of stress on your linebackers and on your safeties to be able to stop the run because these dudes are just getting up the field. They're rushing as fast as they can. Pete King says here, does it remind you of the San Francisco 49ers? The San Francisco 49ers run the wide 9. This is the defense that they run.
He's joking based off our videos on 247 last week. I kept saying things reminded me of the 49ers. But another good question. Is inside zone better against wide 9s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to penetrate.
Right. Inside zone is sorry.
I'm trying to recall that game. They didn't get the run. They couldn't get the running game going against Wake. But it was some of the pass game stuff that killed them early. And then in the second half, they kind of took off. But early, they were struggling handling it on passing downs.
Yeah, so they would get into passing downs, and I think they would do what Wake was able to do was kind of, have an extra linebacker in here and really only bring 3 and get pressure and drop 8. And so that's what was really killing them. It wasn't like in down to down bases. It was they were getting in 3rd and long because the run game wasn't working.
They were also playing games with Jazz, if I recall correctly. But yeah, that game was a long time ago, and I blocked it out of my memory the best that I could because it was so god awful ugly in the first half. Scott was out in that game. Yeah, Bill asked if he was out. Yeah, he was out, and Darius was at left tackle. He struggled mightily. He kind of got better as the year went on, but he was dealing with kind of being back from that knee injury that he had suffered in the spring.
So I think that I think those games are worth going into further. I think that's something we're going to do in the offseason. To me, the NC State game is such an anomaly. You held FSU's offense to 17 points. Yeah. That's not something that's easy to do. And taking a deeper look into how NC State did that, I think is worth the time. So we're probably going to talk about Wake Forest and NC State game probably a fair amount over the course of the offseason because, if I was an opponent of FSU, that's the first games I would watch, right? How did people beat this team? What were some things that worked? So I think that's going to be worth looking into, and it'll probably inform how FSU plays in the future. Mike also talked a little bit, Coach Norvell. Of course, he talked mostly about culture. So he's a big culture guy, as most head coaches are when they get to these clinics. They're going to talk about the stuff. They're trying to sell high school coaches on sending their kids to their program. So, we've got a good culture. We're going to do the best thing we can for your kid, that kind of stuff. So, he talked about climb and defining climb and holding true to your values. And one thing he said was, the reason he doesn't allow kids to wear hoods or earrings in the building is because it shows sacrifice to their teammates, things like that. So that's kind of the conversation that was had at the beginning. Lots of good stuff. And I even got a chance to test it out, right? So all these coaches always have these sayings, right? You've all been part of a team where people are like, oh, we've got like t-shirts that say, elite on the back of it or something, and it stands for something. But it was really cool because I got to talk to Jarian Jones for Valentine's Day show we did on Knowles 247. And out of the blue, I asked him, what does the C stand for in climb? And he just rattled it off. Like the players know.
It's important.
Yeah, and I think a lot of coaches will say their culture is important, but the fact that you could just walk up to any player and ask them, hey, what does the I stand for in climb? And they would be able to tell you, tells you that this I think they're kind of holding their kids accountable to some of these things.
It's interesting to me that Mike only talks about like the hoods and stuff, and maybe he talks about it more. I wasn't there, so I don't know, but that he only talks about like the hoods as part of being just sacrifice, because something a hood also does, you put that hood up, you're not presenting yourself as somebody that wants to talk or wants to be social.
Yeah.
And creating that social atmosphere and that social aspect is important for a team, because you're trying to get these guys all play together as one big unit, one big team. And if you can't communicate, if you can't do those things because you're always walking around with your hood up, and I'm going to hop off my soapbox here very quickly, but if you're always walking around with your hood up and you're not socializing, you're not being part of that team, you're not fitting in, it's hard for everybody to kind of pull in one direction. So I'd be curious if he feels like that's important too. I'm sure he does, obviously, as much as he preaches culture.
But he also talked a little bit about formation. So Mike Norvell does a lot of unbalanced formations. He's they run a lot of counter, right? They run counter, they run slot fade, they run screens. They're not going to try to overwhelm you with the number of plays they run, but they do run a lot of formations. And so he talked a lot about it, the formations he uses, kind of how he thinks about these formations. So here's a play that kind of shows a decent example of it. So right off the bat, I mean, this is a interesting formation just because you have the tight end flexed outside of the wide receiver, right? So to most quarterbacks, my first thought is, well, if I see that this corner is lined up on this tight end, well, I probably have zone coverage, right? Most likely this defense doesn't want to put a 180-pound cornerback on a 230-pound tight end.
Nope.
So most likely you have some sort of zone coverage, right? That's just a tell you can get automatically from the formation, right? But what they do kind of here is he talked a lot about leverage and trying to get good leverage, and you've brought that up too today. But they're gonna motion this tight end in, get a good kind of crack block on this end, and pull their tackle around to kind of get upfield. So now you have a tight end that gets an easy block on someone who he normally would be kind of outmatched for, and now you can get a tackle out in space.
It's all about angles.
Right, so this is kind of a cool play. And Robert Scott doesn't end up really blocking anybody here, but I think he does. I mean, this corner runs himself out of the play.
I think your receiver goes the wrong person too. Well, he's probably got probably not, but
either way,
quicker, he's probably got to be on that safety, but the safety's kind of backpedaling and getting out of there. I think you'll take your running back one-on-one with a safety, but
right, you've made this alley for your running back.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just angles. It's that's a horrible block for Robert Scott if he's trying to block that end. He's never going to get there.
Right.
The elite of the elites don't get there. I mean, unless it's Trent Williams or Lane Johnson, like that's a very difficult block because he's up the field, he's outside of you by 1.5 yards already. It's just not really possible to leverage him. So you're going to crack with Cam McDonald here, and then you're going to kick this little body with Rob Scott. It's just smart football. Again, you get a lot of tells. You get a good idea, a good sense of its own coverage. Something else you can do out of this, and this is what's important, is when you're looking at all this stuff, and from the defensive side, you're looking at it. You just line up in that formation and that set, and you crack down, and you can run some of your screen game off of that. Your tight end screen, run a middle screen to your tight end. They've got to prepare for all this stuff as a defense. So that's why these formations are so important. Formations over plays are always going to be vital.
Yep. And I think that he should get a lot of credit. Something else he kind of brought up in that talk was that they have a one-word tag for Wildcat, and they can make any formation they have on their entire offense Wildcat just with the tag, which is kind of cool. I definitely did not have that when I was in high school.
I know what it is.
He said it.
I'm not going to give it away.
Yeah. But yeah, so they can run any play they have in the entire playbook. They just add one word to the formation tag, and they're doing it out of Wildcat. So if they think, they can get better numbers not having a quarterback stand in the backfield, they can just Wildcat tag it. Yep, just in no huddle. Which I thought was cool.
That's one of those things that sounds really good, but you're not really going to throw it out.
No, but they do run a fair amount of Wildcat.
Let me see. Talk for a minute while I try to find it.
Are you looking for the name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I know the name. I can tell you.
Yeah, that's what you heard it. We have that. We have that.
So.
Yeah, they're install.
Yeah, we do. So. That's kind of Mike Norvell's talk. It was a lot of culture stuff, a lot of things like that.
What did Kirby talk about? Did you hear Kirby talk?
Yeah, Kirby was awesome. Kirby gave a great talk. When you listen to Kirby, you're like, yeah, I kind of get why you're the best coach currently in college football. Won back-to-back natties. The guy knows what he's talking about, and he only talked about one drill with us for like the full hour, but his entertaining. And really, I thought the drill kind of illustrated one of the reasons why he's such a good coach.
Oh, so did he do culture stuff too? Did he do the whole spiel?
He did not. There was no spiel. He went straight into just one drill.
And then told a bunch of stories, or no?
He told some stories.
Saban was very similar. So I heard Saban talk up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and this has been years ago now. But he was very similar. He told a bunch of stories about his wife, a bunch of stories about West Virginia. And then he actually talked about coverages. So he talked about some of his zone coverages, but it was really only like one coverage. They showed a drill, and then the rest of the time, and it was an hour and a half, and the rest of the time he just told stories and was folky and funny as could be. Saban was hilarious.
I think there's more to Kirby. I think Kirby is a Saban clone, and I think that should terrify all of college football.
I think so too.
He's a Saban clone that got to coach under Bobby, so that's even more terrifying.
And Mickey Andrews.
Yeah, Mickey. So basically what Kirby talked about, he had some off comments about, he said some things about Bobby and obviously great things that, Brendan wrote down because I was trying to watch the football.
Check out Brendan's article. Brendan wrote an article on Knowles 24/7 about it if you want to read that.
So he was talking about, I'm going to pull up the blackboard again. He was talking about the old Oklahoma drill. So if anybody's played football at some point in their life, they've done an Oklahoma drill.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically, usually you have 2-on-2 and a running back, or 3. So you have 2 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, a running back, and a linebacker. So basically you kind of I don't know, let's kind of isolate this. So it'd be like this. This would be your drill. One guy has the ball, these guys block, and then it's mano a mano tackling in the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kirby's like, well, we were running this, and we're like, well, no one ever does this anymore. Whoever runs, what, Oklahoma made many basketball?
Made many basketball players.
So no one ever does this. No one's ever just running into a crowded box anymore, right? People are space and pace, right? So he said, why are we doing this 3-on-3? Why don't we do this 3-on-3? And so he says, this is the modern Oklahoma drill. We run a lot of 2 high coverages. why not practice what we play, right? I see this a lot more than I see this.
Of course.
So he kind of called it America's play, this little like flare screen by a running back.
Mm-hmm.
You block up here and you're basically asking this safety to come up. This is why Jamie Robinson was such a big deal on this team, why he's going to be hard to replace, because FSU plays a lot of 2 high safeties. This guy's got to come down. He's got to fill the lane. He's got to be good at it, right? Clemson actually, I think, beat Florida State mostly because FSU was not filling this lane well. FSU was not playing this well.
Yeah, they attacked Keem Dunn.
Yep. And one of the things Kirby said was he wants a guy. So this is one of the things I really like about Kirby, and kind of compare it to someone like James Franklin, who I think is a great coach, just not as good as Kirby.
Offensive mind versus defensive mind.
But when Kirby described things, he described everything he described was tangible. There was something you could define with it. Like he said, I want a cornerback, I want a safety, I want a guy that's willing to put his face in the fan. And when you see that, you know exactly what he's talking about, because these guys put their face mask right in the chest of the running back, right? These guys, it's a very distinct imagery, right?
Yeah. Yep.
He's not up there talking about toughness and all these things that are undefinable. He's talking about, I want a guy that I can see put his face in the fan. And I think that's important. When you listen to a coach talk, is he saying stuff that is just words, or are these things definable traits he can look for and point to in film?
Does he really believe it?
Right. What does toughness mean? It's arbitrary, right? That's just junk word. But he talked about this for forever. I think these things, the Kirby one might find its way online eventually. People like to post those, and it's worth listening to, even if you're just a casual fan. If you're a fan enough to get through 36 minutes of us talking about counter, and then go listen to Kirby Smart Talk, because the guy's special. Yeah. So good question by Bill. Doesn't this require higher level edge blocking and tackle? You certainly go do this, but not sure a lot of teams block well enough to consistently block on the edge. Yeah, on offense. So on offense, people don't care. They're just trying to get your guys to tackle in space, right? They don't care how good of blockers these are, usually, because these corners most of the time aren't going to want to take on a block, right? Or something Kirby talked about was these guys would slip blocks. So if you slip this inside and the safety also fills inside, well, now there's no one outside.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times teams are going to take those 2 guys, and they're going to find the one guy that they don't think will tackle, and they're going to block the other 2.
Right, so you could crack down here.
Could be the Sam, could be the corner. They're going to block the 2 that they think can tackle, and they're trying to get the back one-on-one with the guy who can't, or they feel like can't. So it takes a hell of a lot more athleticism on the defensive side than the offensive side, in my opinion. Especially because offensively, you kind of have an idea where you're going to be, where the ball's going. Defensively, it's much more read and react. I thought this was good. With the talent on D the last few years, did Georgia play more complex or simplified? As in, did good players let them play complicated schemes, or was it with players that this good don't overthink it? They play complex and they play really good.
Yep, they run. So most people will agree that Saban coverages is probably the most complicated coverage scheme in all of football. Like, even if you can look at NFL guys, there's a lot of rules, a lot of if-then statements. If this guy does this, you do this, and it's complicated, and they do a really good job of teaching it.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia's system, and I don't follow Georgia that closely, so I can't say 100%. But I know the MO has been it's a complex system, but they have dumbed it down some because they are so freaking talented.
Yeah, they can get away with only running 2 or 3 of these complex plays, but each coverage in itself is fairly. It's not your traditional either man this guy or zone off. It's not a spot drop anything. It's like a series of rules.
All right, so Keith followed up here. We simplified and went too high because we lack cornerbacks and a reliable non-burst pass rush. So football's going to this, though. Football's going to this play too high, play a late box.
Yep.
Teams want you to run. Teams want you to run the football anymore because they don't feel like you can win a football game running in modern football. So, like, that's a philosophy thing more than we're just trying to get simple. Um, I'm curious to. I know we had it, and it's been a while, so I don't have it right here in front of me. Florida State was like top 10 in two high coverages or 6-man boxes this
Yeah,
year, or
yeah.
something like
So
that. Yeah, in light boxes but like they're in there with Georgia, Alabama, like all the elite
Iowa.
defenses in football, like every elite defense you could think of. Florida State was in that mix. They've just got to continue to get better. Where they're falling behind is, so am I, Henry. So am I. Henry's a firm believer in running the football. Me too, big
Nah,
fella.
get on the pass train.
All right, so we're going to get into Adam Fuller. You spent a lot of time at his talk. You got to talk to him a little bit, and we won't give away too much of that because we don't want to give away what he kind of talked to you about, obviously. But I'm hoping you can offer a little bit of the insight that he shared with you and shared with the collective.
Yeah, so let's talk about the collective because we're gonna come back to coverages because I had a chance to ask him specifically about coverages, and I'm gonna spend a lot of time this offseason breaking down coverages and the defensive backs. I really think that there were some holes in kind of how that's played. One, I think it's the most misunderstood part of football, but two, I think it was really a key to understanding kind of why the enigma that was FSU's 2022 defense, the one that looks good in some stats, but not in the eye test, right?
It's also the aspect that people get to see the least because TV you don't get to see the secondary.
So I'm going to first talk about kind of what Fuller talked about in general. So he talked a lot about a pursuit play or a pursuit drill that he does, and you can kind of see it here. I just found a clip from the game. So Jalen DeLoach is responsible for a fast four. So there's four receivers on the side of the ball now. He's fast to the flats, so he's got to be responsible for it based off their defense. But they're taught when they're pursuing guys to the sideline to attack the near hip, right? So he attacks the near hip. But something to notice here, so he's going to the hip of the running back. But notice here, he doesn't just chase. He falls back because he knows that there's already a guy coming here. So this is something that they drill, and you can see kind of, so he's not just chasing, he's kind of going back. You can see that these guys are following lanes depending on, pursuit angles. Yeah. So that's something they drill. You can see it kind of come out. I think it's one of the reasons why FSU is pretty good at not giving up explosives is because, I mean, they practice what they preach. They do stress this, and they make this a priority in practice, and you can kind of see it show up in the games.
Did he discuss why they attacked the near hip?
So what they're trying to do, right? Defense is all about trust. Mm-hmm. So this guy has to trust that he's not going to turn inside. Mm-hmm. If he comes up hard and he turns inside, well, then everybody looks foolish. So the guy on ball, the guy closest to the ball, attacks the near hip because it doesn't give a cutback lane for the runner.
Yeah,
so
it's all about preventing the cutback.
Right.
If you're on his near hip, and I'm sure they do 3-bag drills where they play off of that back hip, but yeah, it's all about preventing the cutback.
Yep, because if you prevent the cutback, he can trust and fill that lane aggressively. Otherwise, he would have to wait.
Think about this defense in its early years. That first year against was that them? They played up at Louisville, and the back was like cutting out the back door and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. That was that kind of stuff where they didn't trust where they were supposed to be at. They didn't fit it correctly. You start to see them fit it a lot better these days.
One interesting thing that kind of got brought up earlier before Fuller talked, which was like in direct contrast to what Fuller was saying, was Alex Golish, the guy that's now USF's head coach, who was Tennessee's offensive coordinator last year. Yeah. He says he loves it when he sees teams that have 11 hats running to the ball like FSU has here. He'll just have his offensive line up right here, and now you've got to reset everybody. So there's pros and cons
whatever. Running to the football is a mindset, because the one time you get one guy, you get just one guy with a hat on the ball and that guy breaks it, then it's gone. So
right.
it's all, the whole 11 hats on the football it's all about mindset. Freaking offensive guys are always trying to screw with people.
Yeah, he said that if you're not involved in the play, like he would want his offensive line to already be set up so they can snap the ball as fast as possible. It's just kind of funny hearing the defensive guys pursuit, aggressive. The offensive guys are like, well, something else he talked about that I think came out. I had the Clemson game pulled up when I was grabbing these clips, and I just saw this. He did talk about they do a lot of SWAT drills. So you can see here, this is Pat Payton over here on the edge. He does a good job. He doesn't get to the ball, but you can see he's actually lost this. He's kind of been pushed around the pocket. But you can see his arm coming out right here, just swatting at that ball. I mean, that's something they drill. That's not something that's just natural for him. That's something that he's kind of been drilled to do, trying to get turnovers. So just a little cool thing there. Just hearing that's not a natural thing. That's drilled. That's something that he's been taught to do.
We all want to hear about secondary play.
All right, let's talk secondary. All right, me and you, and I really am going to dive into this in solo because I know a lot of people aren't getting through 50 minutes of this video, but thanks.
If they are, we love you.
Thank you for doing that. We're just talking football, man. We're just enjoying ourselves. So I got to ask him about coverages, because basically what we've thought and what we've said all season was it looks like they're doing one of two things. They're either pulling a safety down, into the box and running what's called man free, where you're basically manned across the board, however you want to slice it, and they'll bring a blitzer or something, right? They have an extra person in the box, or they'll have a rat defender, right? Someone just chilling out in the middle, but a lot of man free, right? So you probably heard the narrative that FSU plays man coverage. But when they weren't playing man free, it kind of looked like they were doing a lot of two man. So, they're playing man either way, right? Either they're dropping two safeties back or one safety back. Like, what are they doing? That's kind of what it looked like. But the more I watched, the more I thought, well, maybe they're running a lot of cover 4. And I know they run a lot of cover 4, and it just looks like man. So that's something I got to talk to them about cover 4. They have like 10 different ways they run cover 4. Which is pretty standard.
I think it's important to note there's a massive narrative, and we were on it early and then got off of it and kind of started pushing back against it as the season went on, that this team can't run zone coverages, that they couldn't teach them, that they couldn't run them. Lo and behold, they've been running them all year.
Yeah, they have. And
so if you hear people saying they can't run zone coverages, you need to question their football acumen, because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's someone that doesn't really know what they're looking at.
Yeah, it's a false statement. It's a false statement at this point. We know this. We're going to show this to you. Kev has talked to Adam Fuller directly about it. At this point, that's not reality. You need to trust a different source when talking about football.
So this is the kind of cover 4 I've seen them run before, and they were kind of running early on. This is kind of falls into they organize zone coverages nowadays based off the shape they make. So this is like a box cover 4.
Yeah.
So some people would call this stress, right? So it's basically a very traditional cover 4. They're playing a kind of variant where they man up on number 3 here. So this guy mans up on this inside receiver and follows him. But it's just cover 4, right? You've got these two on this half of the field. You've got these two guys playing deep halves. He's going to pick up him. He's going to pick up whoever's deep over here, right? And so the way you would beat this is, you have someone hook or run a dig, and then you get a free post over the top. In my mind, there's a play from NC State 2 seasons ago They got an easy touchdown in one of the first drives on this kind of Mills concept against traditional cover 4.
Yep.
So I got to talk to Fuller and ask him kind of like, hey, are you guys, still running a lot of cover 4? I'd love to hear about that. And he was like, no, I do think we're running a little bit more cover 2 man. I think what they do is they play cover 2 man sometimes. So this safety is going to drop to this half, right? So we're going to look at half the field. So he's got deep half. These guys are manned up. But I think there are switch rules. So if like these guys are close and they switch, well, he's going to pick this guy up and he's going to pick this guy up, right? They have some sort of switch rules going on here. So I think he would classify this as cover 2 man. You see that the safety last second kind of takes this deep half, right? He's in this deep half over here. So he did verify that they would consider something like this cover 2 man.
Well, let's be clear on a lot of concepts as they get to work their way down the field, it becomes a man concept. Especially on deeper stuff, it does become man down the field, but
right. But you can kind of see that it's still match man, right?
Yeah.
So
yep.
You can see these two guys are banjoing these receivers. So the running back goes out. He actually passes off his man to the linebacker and takes him. And so it's man in the sense that now he's manned on him and he's manned on him, but they were able to switch their men. So it's man coverage, quote unquote man coverage, but it's not, right? That's match man. That's what it's called, right? You wait till the receivers declare and you match them. Right. One thing he did tell me was that they're not soloing their safety a lot anymore. I must have caught them when they are soloing. So basically what solo means is if it's a 3-by-1, so it's 3 receivers to one side and 1 to this other side, the safety on this half of the field, he's soloing, his eyes are over here. I guess let's see. He's not soloing here because he does have his eyes on this receiver.
Yeah, he picks up the crosser.
So he picks up number 1. So he's not soloing here. So
he ends up switching with the corner.
Right. So if this receiver goes inside, he's going to take him. If the receiver goes outside, the corner stays with him. So yeah, I guess he's not soloing here.
So if you want to know why breakdowns in coverage happen, there you go, because it's a convoluted mess as all these offensive players are running all over the stinking place.
Right, and they're trying to throw you off, right? Like,
and you've got to communicate. And I wish we had some all-22 of the Oklahoma game and the Florida game. We were very critical of Kevin Knowles in the Florida game for some of his coverage breakdowns, when in actuality, some of the breakdowns were on Shaheem Brown. You just can't see him in the screen because it's so low and so tight. There's a lot of communication that goes on the field that you can't see between corners and safeties and linebackers in these coverages. And I think that Florida State this year got put in position where they were playing young guys at times. I think that was well documented. We talked about Azareye'h Thomas, some of the struggles that he had when he came in. Shaheem Brown also. These young guys, they struggle with this communication. It's not natural to them. It's not something they did in high school. They're still having to learn it all the nuances. I mean, Kev said they've got like 10 different versions of cover 4. And that's just one coverage. You start running cover 2 man, you start running some cover 3. If you're running any cover 1, there's just so much there that it's natural guys are going to have breakdowns.
Well, I think what's interesting is so Bill said it and you were kind of saying it was communication struggles were the issue. From my perspective, I think this is something that we could probably dive into and throughout the offseason, because I think this is a good thing to talk about. FSU didn't give up a lot of explosive plays. So how many of these things were coverage miscommunications and how many of them were players getting isolated in man coverage and getting beat, right? I think that's something we can look into and quantify, because I think that's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, I know you think about the here's Briley asks, do we need another safety to make the college football playoff? I would love to find another one. I think Shaheem Brown's a really good player. I think that you would feel better if you had another safety back there that was a true cover guy. You could play him at some nickel and do some different things with him, like they did with Jamie Robinson as the season went on. What was I getting at there? So Hussey might be ready by season's end. But again, we're talking about a young player. Is he going to have all the communication down, or are you going to get slip ups?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to ask.
It is. So what we were talking about, the communication. So in the Florida game, you saw Shaheem Brown get beat. They ran a combo route. He ended up getting beat. That field, it looked like it was on Knowles, but it wasn't. It was on Shaheem Brown being out of position. He did one thing. He thought he was supposed to do something different. And
gotcha.
They didn't communicate it well. Huh?
In the Florida game?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, is that on the wheel route touchdown to?
It was on one of the deep ones. It wasn't the one that beat Knowles over the top by his fingertips. It was the one before that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But then if you look at Oklahoma, they did a great job of isolating linebackers. It wasn't as much a miscommunication issue. They isolated guys and they attacked those guys because they found athletic advantages that were in their favor and they went after them.
So we were just talking about this. They knew that they could get FSU in cover 2 man if they put their receivers in stack.
Yep.
So basically, that same coverage I was showing you earlier, it's cover 2 man. Basically, you're just going 3 over 2 here to kind of keep them from beating you over the top. Well, that means that if you have like a tight end over here, I mean, who's got to cover this route? Well, it's got to be this guy.
It's got to be your Mike. And they were able to get it so that they were doing it at Tatum Bethune, who's not as athletic as Kalen DeLoach.
Yep.
And then we adjusted and we put Kalen DeLoach on it and took it away a little bit better. What's interesting is, and I think what a lot of people argue, well, why don't you do something different? You have a base scheme that you go into a season with and you're running throughout the course of the season. And as guys get hurt, you've got to tailor things and pull things back. If you remember, they played that game with Shaheem Brown because Akeem Dent was out. They were having to play some reserves. They were really young at corner. So I think that the lack of scheme is due to lack of talent, but also lack of experience on the back end. I do think that an area that we can be critical is that they do need to be. I think Adam Fuller needs to be quicker on the trigger of adapting to some of these things in game, but also his mantra when he came here was being offensive minded and he was going to be attack oriented. I don't think that they've been that to date.
They've been the average in terms of blitz numbers.
Yeah, but being attack oriented doesn't have to be just about blitzing. It's what are you doing when you blitz? When these guys blitz, it doesn't feel like there's a purpose. When you watch Georgia blitz, they break down protection schemes. Yep. When Florida State blitzes, it doesn't feel like they're attacking protections. It feels like they're just sending guys through gaps. So those are some areas where I would like to see them kind of improve. And I know this wasn't necessarily supposed to be about defensive improvement. We're going to get into all this as the year goes on, but my mind starts running all over the place here as we're talking.
Well, I think there's one more play I want to share that kind of talks about all this stuff. So, okay. The first point I want to make here is that coverages are more complicated than they may seem. When we watch this game with regular footage, we probably call this man free, right? Mm-hmm. Looks like you have man across the board with one deep safety, right? And without much more information because of the TV copy, that's kind of what we got, right?
Yeah, the basic checks are all there that it's man coverage. Their eyes are on the guys in front of them. They're lined up across the board.
But then you see this.
Yep, that's a zone right away.
Right, so they're showing man, but they dropped a zone. What ends up happening is I think this is some kind of cover 3, match cover 3, right? So they're going to kind of fall in cover 3, but if the guy goes to where their zone would be in cover 3, they're going to take him like it's man. Mm-hmm. So I think you've got this deep safety. I think he's going to take this guy as long as he's deep, right? If he were to do like a hitch, I think he would fall off and look for number 2. because that's what's kind of happening down here. I think
All
you're
right,
getting.
let's let it play. And then we can run back.
It's also possible it's a cover 4 down here. But
Well, the only thing that interests me about it maybe not being cover 3 is your safety is robbing. Like,
that's true. That's true.
there's
So
nothing
that's
else in the
probably a good
field.
indication this is probably some kind of cover 4.
Yeah.
So you might have this guy. So this safety in cover 4 feels comfortable to nail down on some routes
Yeah.
because he knows he's deep.
Yeah, he can squat on glance routes.
So yeah, I mean that's a good point. This probably cover 4 of some kind if he's going to be that aggressive. But then it kind of looks like they're just man up straight up here.
Yeah.
They do. People do half field
Well,
coverages.
that's what I was going to say. I mean, the thing you got to remember is there is split field coverages, and Florida State does have some of those.
Right. And so, yeah, maybe you're getting some sort of man on top with some sort of zone at the bottom. I mean, it's clear this is zone, right? He's in a zone drop.
Yeah.
He lets this guy go inside. He turns his eyes out here. That's very typical. Like this, that is textbook what Kevin Knowles does here. This is textbook cover 4. Does a great job. He sees that guy release inside. He gets a hand on him. Then he finds number 1 and robs him.
Yeah.
So yeah. So this might be some kind of cover 4. This is where things get murky. It's hard to know without the play call sheet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not as simple as Florida State can't run zone. Florida State can't run like only runs man. These are complicated, right? There's this guy kind of comes on a blitz, but is he really going on a blitz or is he just matching the running back?
Right.
So yeah, where can you what do you do with this? Well, you can be more aggressive. You can say, we're not going to play zone down here. We're going to just man up and bring one of these dudes. But that offers its own issues.
The thing I would say is don't be as predictable. Don't find yourselves down in distances situations being in the same thing all the time, because I think that's where you get beat. And I also think moving your front around is important in modern football. I do think that if you're in the same place all the time, it's stagnant. It's a clean picture for the offense at all times. That's an area where I think that they could be better. And then again, I think when we talk about attacking, it's not just about blitzing. It's about attacking the offense's protection schemes, and which is a blitz, but having a purpose when you're blitzing, attacking right. What they're trying to do, and taking away their strength and making it a strength for you.
Right, knowing their protection schemes. How can you get your guy on? That's a common thing you'll see in the NFL, right? How do you match up your big linebacker or defensive end with their running back, right? How can you present a blitz that gets them to check a certain way? There's all sorts of games you can play. And what's kind of odd is that Fuller came in with this like 4-2-5, but really it was kind of a hybrid 4-4-2 and 3-3. That Fox was supposed to be a linebacker hybrid. So I was expecting to see some more they'll hop into 3 down sometimes, they'll hop into 4 down sometimes. You haven't seen as much of that. You did see them go to a 5 down front a little bit, and I think they're going to do that a lot more next year.
It would make a lot of sense. I mean, they've invested a lot of time and energy in getting themselves deep at the defensive line, especially the defensive tackle position. But they've got some hybrid type guys. Braden Fisk I think he's hybrid. I think he could play outside if you needed him to. Dennis Briggs is a guy that could play in or out. But I think you have those types of bodies. I'm anxious to see what they decide to do with it. We know this: they're going to be a light box again. You didn't go get all of those. You didn't go get all those defensive tackles and defensive linemen to not be saying, we're going to run a light box, we're going to play a 6-man box, and we're going to try to be better in coverage behind it. So, yeah, I'm curious to see if they'll run some 5-man front. It would make a lot of sense to me. You've got a true nose in the Darrell Jackson. You've got two really good 3 techs in Fabian Lovett and Braden Fisk. It would make a lot of sense to me to do some of that stuff, but we'll see if they think so.
Yeah, and just to be clear, for those of you guys that have gotten this far and don't know what a light box is, this is what we're talking about. So the base formation in college football today is 11 personnel, or the base personnel, right? So you're going to have one tight end, usually as kind of like an offset, either H back or kind of wing here, and then a running back. And so the numbers that I'll come out with later, I'm going to do a video that kind of talks about this in more depth and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. But basically, we're going to call it a light box when FSU has 6 men in the box versus their 6 blockers, right? So in theory, you don't have someone to account for the running back that's in the box. So that'd be a light box.
Right.
In theory, one of these guys, one of these 3 people has to come in and fill. And that's where things can get complicated and how you want to mix and match that. But that's what a light box is. That's what people are going to more and more often, because on a down-to-down basis, there's more yards per play in a passing play than there's a running play. And so the numbers dictate you want to stop the run or stop the pass, not stop the run.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I got from this clinic. There's obviously a lot more I got. There's sports psychologists and all that stuff that talked that I thought were really interesting. So I'm not going to bore you guys with all that. I think there's one thing I do want to talk about because I thought this was fascinating. It goes against what everybody thinks about football. A sports psychologist was talking about trying to calm your kids down before a football game. Like he was teaching, the box breathing techniques, all of these things of how to relax your players, how to calm your players. And one of the football coaches up front, obviously probably a defensive guy, goes, I don't want to calm my players down. I want my kids like, what about I got to get my kid fired up? And the sports psychologist is like, dude, your kids are already so like anxious. They're already so up here that like,
so
some kids might need that firing up, but most kids probably are too anxious already.
So it's interesting you bring this up. So obviously the Eagles and the Chiefs just played in the Super Bowl. I'm an avid Eagles fan, and Jason Kelce and Travis Kelce have a podcast together. The 2 brothers, they just played the Super Bowl together. Jason Kelce, 5-time All-Pro, going to be a Hall of Fame center. Travis Kelce, obviously All-World, All-Pro tight end. They were in their podcast, they talk about their games and they talk about kind of what they do. So in this one, they talked about the Super Bowl and they were talking about what each of them did before the game. And both of them, it's incredible. Both of them said they played games on their telephone because they didn't want to waste all of their energy. They didn't want to exhaust themselves before they got out to the game and on the field. They wanted to try. They said that, their anxiety was already as high as it could be. It was important to them to try to stay level-headed, not overdo it before you get out there. Try to build themselves up to the game being, the moment when you kind of unleash that anxiety on the field. They wanted to be calm. They wanted to be calm in the locker room. It was important not to overdo it. So it's very interesting that you heard the sports psychologist talk about that, and then here's 2 of the best in the NFL both saying, yeah, we sat and played games on our telephone. And I can remember the bus ride. You can't talk on the bus ride. You got to be focused, locked in. Like, looking back on it now, it's so stupid. Like, these kids are all so anxious. Like, there's so much anxiety that goes into a football game beforehand. It's important to not lose focus on trying to build a good mindset to go into a game.
So I think we're getting one more question that I think is worth it. Both Keith and Briley are asking basically the same question. How does our scheme get affected with a 5-man front? So this is my thought. This is how it gets affected. I don't know what you think, but I think mostly you kind of roll up a linebacker. Your secondary play stays mostly the same. It's not going to change too much there. It does change run fits along the line a little bit.
It's I don't know if I'd run a 5-1. I think I would stick with a 5-2. And Jared Verse is hella athletic. I wouldn't be afraid to drop him a little bit this year.
Yeah, I think they're going to do that too.
Try to play some games. Pat Payton also. I mean, they're both so athletic. Like, I think it makes some sense to play some games with them in coverage and drop them hot on some of the. If you think you're going to get a glance route, like trying to anticipate some of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, no, I think the 5-1 has its benefits. You take Bethune out and you let Deloach sit in the middle, and or vice versa. It doesn't matter which one it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just play games with it. It messes with blocking assignments a lot, right? If a team wants to run inside zone, well, you're not really getting any double teams, right?
Your 5 versus their 5 should be advantage you in the majority of games you play this year. The problem is if it does create some weird angles if you're running a 5-1. You can do some cross blocking stuff. Counter tray becomes a real B. You're putting a lot on your secondary. I would love to see some tight front this year, but I won't say it too loud because I know we won't get it. I think we'll see some bare front. We'll see.
Yeah,
we're going to know more in spring. Not a whole lot more because spring is about developing your players and not as much about scheme. But we'll find some stuff out as we go along here.
Yeah, I think we'll see. I'm very curious to see kind of if this is still like Kevin Knowles' position to lose, if they're going to move, who they're going to move to safety, because right now there's just not enough numbers on the safety. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. So I think, I think there's some good questions. And honestly, I think just talking today brought up a lot of good things that we can talk about throughout the rest of the offseason. So if there's anything that you guys want to see this offseason, any big questions that kind of came in your mind, go over to Knowles 247. So like and subscribe to our channel, X's and Knowles 247 YouTube channel, but more importantly, go over to Knowles 247, the website where we're kind of giving our written opinion. We have a chance to kind of sit down and write things out, and you can kind of have access to, Coach AB's thoughts 24/7. And I think that's the most important thing.
Dangerous.
So before last thing, any too early predictions for King of the Spring?
Zion Holmes, I hope, just for all the fanatics that are out there desperate for that dude to be a stud. I have no clue.
Zion Holmes. Yeah, we do not have enough talent at the running back position.
Who's going to practice? We're going to find out in 2 weeks. I mean, they start the first weekend of March, so I can't wait. Can't wait for spring football to be here.
It's right there.
Yeah. So if you're interested in spring football, I mean, like I said, Brendan, Chris, Zach, Dane, Brett's going to be out there. Kev hopefully will be out there if it's night practices.
Yeah, it is. So I'll be out for a lot of practices.
Obviously, where the coverage is going to be. We will be breaking down as much of that as we can. We've got a really, really cool project that's going to come out post-spring. I don't want to give it away because I don't want people to try to steal it. But I think everybody that's a subscriber to this channel is really going to love it. I appreciate 75 of you that came and hung out with us tonight as we football gasmed and had a lot of fun just kind of talking ball and just kind of BSing on a Thursday night. Please be sure to like the video. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. Get over to Knowles 24/7. Become a subscriber over there. I think that's going to do it for a Thursday night.
Yep. Let us know if this is something you're interested in seeing more of, or if we need to bring Trey back to bring some energy to this dry session. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys soon.
See you guys.